So hello, I wanted to ask you a few questions about WSIB, your work injury, and your experience throughout the process. My first question to you is, what is your name and the area that you're from?
My name's Paul Taylor, and originally I was from Mississauga, then Guelph, and now I recently live in Hamilton, Ontario.
Okay, that's interesting. How did you end up injured and what occurred to have the injury happen?
I was working for Canadian Tire at the time as a truck driver, and at Canadian Tire, all the loads going to the stores are hand loaded and hand unloaded by the driver. And a load fell on me, hitting my back, neck, and back, neck, and head, causing a very serious injury. Actually, I was injured, that was February 6th of 97. Then I was re-injured July 7th, and then again August 28th, 98.
So what effects did those injuries have on your life in general?
Devastating. They talk about the workers' compensation system being there and insurance in general as a trust system that we trust it. And I would say without question that nobody should ever trust them again because it just doesn't work. It's based on blame that throughout the entire process of my injury and dealing with the board and the tribunal and even the courts, it's constantly accusing you of faking when there's no reason to. There's no medical or any evidence to support the accusation. And the reasoning is for the employer to save money.
With that in mind, what would you think would be the best thing that ever happened with you with WSIB? I know that might be a hard question to answer.
The best for me would be is to see a complete change in the whole system, where ideally I'd like to see at least an equal representation of injured workers that are elected by injured workers and employer reps elected by employers sitting on the board of directors making board policy. It's my opinion that the errors and mistakes within the board and tribunal come from the top down. They're not minor mistakes. They're intentional negligence under covert policies.
So with those thoughts in mind, what is the worst thing that you've experienced through your WSIB process?
Severe financial hardship. Many people look at people and they say, oh, you look fine. But if you're not able to work, that's the most important thing. And a Supreme Court justice, and I can't remember the judge's name or what exactly they said, but it was something to the effect of working is one of the most important things for a person to do in society because it provides you a position. Money, your work gives you money, and money allows you for a roof over your head, food in your belly, and other things. These we often take for granted as workers until we get hurt. And because we can't work, we're not welfare, we're injured. And because of that situation, it creates severe financial hardships. You become a deadbeat debtor to creditors. Family members disown you, so to speak, because they think you're faking. Meanwhile, you did nothing to cause them to say that. And then the worst part is that your credit is destroyed. Your whole life is destroyed from the financial perspective. But then the emotional side too is that you're always seen as a faker when there was no justification for it. As I always say now, is that the workers' compensation system has become nothing more than a witch hunt.
I actually enjoyed that analogy. Given this new KPMG report, what would you say is the basis for that reasoning on their report?
The only reasoning that the board in the past 30 years has done anything was purely to save money for employers. Well, to save money for themselves to generate profit, then to turn around and take that profit and buy elections, in my opinion. And so in looking at the KPMG report, it's to deny more claims quickly. It is without question not only a violation of procedural fairness, rule of law, it's a charter violation without question. And not getting off, but when you look, if Canadians looked at the charter and actually read it, section 1, 2, 3, 4, it's very simple, it's plain language. And then you read and you experience what the board does, you would say, what the, there's a complete conflict. Why is the board allowed to do this? And the tribunal. And it's because they're seen as above the law, and they're not.
Well, I thank you for those takes on that. If we can go back and touch a little bit about your personal injuries. You said you were injured a few times. Exactly how did that occur?
It's what I call as the WSIB's or WCB's then forced return to work program. Some of the programs that I've studied over the years with workers' compensation is that first they instituted a no more benefits for as long as the disability lasts, creating an age discrimination factor. And then they implemented severe forced return to work. This meant oftentimes workers were being sent back to work in dangerous and unsafe situations for them themselves, as well as people around them. In my own case, I was on opiate pain medication, the oxycodone or cotton or whatever it's called. I was taking them like Flintstone vitamins for pain management. And the board repeatedly said, it's safe for you to go back. They didn't care. They did not care.
Even
And
though you were driving a commercial vehicle?
a transport truck, they don't care. Even today, they show no concern for public safety or for worker safety at all. The word workplace safety is in the name, but it doesn't mean anything to them. And it's not the staff. I want to make clear, it's not the staff. It's the system. It's the policies, the covert policies that the board implements by implementing a forced return to work program. How often do you hear the decision maker sitting there saying, we decide what is safe and suitable? How can you do that when you're not even a doctor? How can you do that when you never even left an office in your life before? These are the big contradictions. And that happens because it comes from the top down, So in my case, it was forced return to work as a truck driver for over 40 years, whatever. I can't even remember anymore. It's instinctive to be concerned about safety. We're always bred at safety, safety, safety all the time. Well, until you get injured, then safety is secondary. The first priority is get them back to work so we don't have to pay them workers' compensation. And that pretty much applies to any job anywhere. The last thought on the mind of the employer and the board staff and the tribunal is safety of the worker and of co-workers and the public. They don't care. They really don't. Because as they say in the law, it says return to work. Why is there such this fixation of return to work? Simple. It's because if you're back at work, the board doesn't have to pay you any benefits. The employer looks good and looks like they're a safe employer. And the only one that's suffering is the worker because they're in chronic pain.
So I noticed that you have licensed paralegal on your name tag here. Did you become this after your work injury?
Yeah, it's quite funny, my story. I was injured in 97, like I said. Then in 2000, the board sent me for retraining to become a computer engineer. I say engineer with sarcasm because to become an engineer, it takes 4 years university in engineering. They gave me a computer class for 1 year in college. It was completely not suitable. After 3 years of fighting with the board, they finally realized, oh yeah, it's actually computers. What was funny is that in the engineering program and computers both, you can't be somebody that's partially colorblind, which is me. This means that if you're partially colorblind, and that's very common, there's like 3 to 4 males out of every 10 are partially colorblind. What that means is that you can't do jobs where you have to tell colors apart. That's all it is, and it's genetic. It's very common. And when I told them this, they didn't care. They just said, yeah, that's fine. So there was that issue. Then there was the issue that I wasn't really an engineer, even though they thought I was. And people would say, well, who cares? What does it matter? The difference between the work of an engineer and the work of a computer person is an engineer is light work. A computer person is medium to heavy work, which violated my restrictions. So when I raised this point, they didn't change the job or anything. They just said, well, this is suitable. As the board always does, they make the rules up as they go along. And when something isn't suitable or whatever, they just say it is. And that's what they did. I find in my experience, they are horrible when it comes to dealing with people with disabilities, whether it be work-related or not. So after they sent me for retraining, it was a complete disaster. Even in the retraining program, I couldn't do most of the tasks that I was required to do. But I passed, and because I passed, they said, well, you can do the job. I then was lucky enough to get employment in IT working for the city of Mississauga, but I was eventually fired because I couldn't do the job. Then I looked at going to school. I went to school. I got into marketing at college, business marketing. I did the 3-year program, graduated with honors. And then from there, I transferred to university to McMaster. And I initially went in there in business, and then eventually I transferred to philosophy and law because I was interested in law, not because law is, passionate and I love it. I hate law. It's that I was doing it for myself to fight my own case. I've often said that the problem with the workers' compensation system is with the lack of representation, that once an injured worker is injured, they would be quicker to go to university, get their degree, then go to law school, get their law degree, do their internship, and by the time they're done all that, they'd be ready to represent themselves at the WSIB and the appeal because of the delay in the system of getting representation and the appeal hearings. So at any rate, I transferred into philosophy, and then philosophy is very interesting and I did enjoy it and I still do. And then I since transferred into labor studies. While I was doing that, I took a break and went to the paralegal program at Sheridan, which was a 2-year program. And I graduated, got my law degree, or whatever you call it, law degree. And I'm a licensed paralegal, but I'm still at university attending the labor studies program.
Well, that's very interesting. And I thank you very much for sharing your story with us. So would you consider yourself a success through all of this, or would you consider yourself to be still in process? Because I understand your appeal is still being processed.
I would say that myself, it's because I keep fighting to survive every day, like every injured worker does. And what angers me and sickens me to no end is the system has completely failed. It's a horrible system. It doesn't work. And it's not just in Ontario, if I may add, it's across the country. Because I've learned, initially when I first got hurt, I just thought it was me. I thought they were treating me this way. And then over time, as I started talking to other injured workers in Ontario and across Canada, this is a systemic issue. And the systemic issue of hatred against injured workers for just being injured. And that's what I want to see change, is that it's got to stop because it's not right. It's no different, and I don't mean to be disrespectful to any group, but it's no different than looking at Native and Indigenous people just because that's who they are. It's no different than looking at women and criticizing them just because they're women. It's the same kind of discrimination, and it's got to stop.
So in other words, in order to make the WSIB work, first of all, in my opinion, Meredith needs to be brought back into the picture. And from what you're saying, they need to have an inclusivity lens, which with my experience as well, it seems to lack.
It's funny that you bring up the word exclusivity.
Inclusivity.
Yes, inclusivity, because the board in their statement or strategic thing or whatever you want to call it, mission statement, they actually mention that. But quite honestly, they have no concept of what that word means. Because if you look at their board of directors, they have 2 that so-called represent injured workers. But the representatives, meaning their lawyers or paralegals, they've never been injured. They don't know what it's like to be an injured worker. The rest are employers, and of that, financial background. They have zero knowledge in workers' compensation, none of them. And they're all concerned, and they keep saying we're all concerned about finance. The financial department at the WSIB deals with the finances. You don't need to be a financial person. You need to make the right decisions to make sure, for example, that when an injured worker leaves Ontario, the board cannot implement a policy where they're going to discriminate against them by withdrawing their benefits because they moved. It's a charter violation. How could such a policy be created? Because the people that are creating these policies are only thinking about money. They're not thinking about, so to speak, the legal, but the humane side of it. That's the biggest problem.
Is to bring the humane back into it. If that was to be brought back into it, you believe that would change the whole system? I mean, aside from all the other policy changes that need to be made in order to accomplish that, but the
Like,
main
I mean,
lack.
this old guy that I keep saying, I think he was in the Times of Meredith, Carl Creever, a great man, great man. And he's been around forever, like I said. He once said to me, well, Paul, what should we do? And I said, just get rid of the whole system. And he said, what's in its place? And I said, I don't know. That's not my problem. I'm an injured worker. You asked for my opinion. What should we do with this system? Get rid of it. It doesn't work. Every time you do something like this, businesses, through bribes to government, corrupt the system and screw it all up. Privatize it? Probably not. Because if we go with private insurance, that won't work either, because we'll have the same system we have with car insurance. And the president of WSIB, David Marshall, he set that up. So now you can't even sue your car insurance company. So it's like workers' comp 2.0. It's private, but you can't even sue when they do wrong.
So either overhaul the system to represent the 5 principles, or remove it entirely is what you believe the result would be.
I wouldn't say, I'm not sure about any. I'm just saying the current system doesn't work in its face, nor would a private system work either. You know, and the current system is a government-run system, and it's not working because the government is being exploited, bribed, paid by business to do what they're doing right now. You know, they've given $3 billion back to employers. They didn't get that money through increased extreme employer premiums. They got that through illegally cutting funds to injured worker benefits. Why did they do it? They don't care, because they're getting money from businesses to do that. So there's, in my opinion, criminal corruption going on. Why is it happening? That's why. If we go with a private system like the car insurance system, again, that doesn't work either. You know, because it's the corruption. You have to deal with the corruption. It's businesses that are the problem. They're acting that their number one priority is only money. They don't care about the environment. They don't care about people. They claim they have corporate social responsibility, which is garbage. It's a marketing thing. I got taught that in marketing school. It's nothing but deception.
Well, my understanding of corporation is that we basically have no accountability anymore, because the individuals within that corporation are no longer responsible, and you blame the corporation, which essentially removes the human nature by which you were talking from being able to hold WSIB accountable. So that's quite an interesting concept.
Well, it's funny because I actually took a business ethics course in university in philosophy. And after I stopped laughing when I said to the professor, business ethics, that's an oxymoron, a contradiction in terms. And it is. Because businesses lack ethics. They do. And they'll say, oh, it's not true. We do this. And it's like, your number one priority is money, not the environment and not people, because that's shown by your actions. Your actions dictate, not your words. And that's what I've noticed with businesses, that the only thing they care about is profit and money. And within the business ethics model, that's one of the biggest issues, was raising the point in it that individual stakeholders, meaning the officers of the company, the board of directors, the president themselves, are responsible for the ethics of the company. And they're right, like the professor was right in making the argument, that business ethics is not about the business, the company, the corporate model. It's about the individuals making those decisions. Because when I'm a president or whatever, the only thing I care about is getting that stock price up. So I'll do whatever's necessary. And that's because I lack the ethics to say, wait a minute, this is hurting, you know, people, this is hurting our staff. But any president today you talk to doesn't care. Look at Galen Weston. He just got a big fat pay raise.
Yeah, exactly. And does he care about the inflation's cost? No.
No.
Well, I thank you very much for that information, Paul, and I'm glad that you shared your story with us, and hopefully this will bring light to other people and we can make change through all of this. So thank you again.
No problem. Thank you, Carol.